Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I guess it depends on where you are. Welcome to our webinar on dealing with executive attention span disorder in your long-running enterprise data program. My name is Mike Latito. I'll kick off the webinar this morning, and then Grant Sutton, our practice lead, will take you through how to deal with sometimes in a data governance program, there's the sponsorship sort of wanes after a while at the executive level, and Grant can walk through some ideas and some things that he's done in his past lives in terms of keeping the program moving and baking that into your normal operations. Next slide, Grant. So again, my name is Mike Latito. I'm a sales director for the West region, and with us today is Grant Sutton. He is our practice director, practice lead at Datasource Consulting. So just to give you a quick backdrop on Datasource, we're exclusively focused on enterprise data management. So we provide a set of advisory services as well as implementation. So we do data governance, roadmaps, assessments, and help customers with tool selection process. And then on the implementation side, we have a set of implementation capabilities that we have, including data architecture, data integration, test data management, master data management, analytics, and of course cloud. And so just as a quick backdrop, that's who Datasource Consulting is, and today Grant Sutton will be speaking about our data governance process and how to get some executive sponsorship, or how to continue to move forward without focused executive sponsorship. Next slide, Grant. So I'll turn it over to Grant. One thing I want to mention though before I turn it over is, if you have questions, we'll do questions at the end, and if you wouldn't mind just typing those into the question box, and we'll take your questions and pitch those to Grant at the end of the webinar, and we can walk through those. So Grant, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Welcome everybody, and we'll be flying through this. I want to make sure I leave time at the end for you to answer as many of your questions as we can. So as Mike said, if you have those along the way, or if you feel like I skimmed over something you want a little more detail on, please be sure to note that and send that question in. We're talking today, as Mike indicated, about the plague of executive attention span disorder, and kind of four related, complementary strategies that can help avoid this problem that comes from that. We'll talk about what it is, and those four strategies that you see there: incredibly clever sponsor selection, forming an alliance of necessary evils, courageous communication, and surfing the data waves. And again, at the end, we'll have hopefully have time for your questions. So, with that said, let's get into this. I've been doing enterprise data stuff for well over 20 years, and have been doing data governance stuff for over a dozen years. And one thing is constant, is that we're always told that executive sponsorship is absolutely critical to the success of our project. Here's some quotes from different folks on that theme, and I won't read this to you, but it's 81%. Big impact on project success. Again, Standish Group says most important person in the project is the executive sponsor. Okay, again, this probably isn't new to any of you listening on the call. PMI, or the Beloved Project Management Institute, says that actively engaged executive sponsor is a top driver for project success, and this is the real interesting part. Yet that same research shows that fewer than 2/3 of projects and programs have assigned executive sponsors. So there's clearly, over the decades, there's been this message drilled into us that this is important, and yet we still struggle to get that. And the PMI research suggests that people may not fully recognize the importance of the role, but in my experience, that can be a reason. But often you realize it's important, and just trying to get it is a battle. So whatever the case is for you, or wherever you find yourself, hopefully what we talk about here can be useful to you. PROCI, another organization, did some benchmarking reports over 10 years, and executive sponsor, again, very closely tied to project success. But furthermore, the effectiveness of that sponsor is one of really the strongest predictor. Having someone on your project governance chart, or whatever, in your steering committee, or whatever it is, just having a name on there isn't really enough. They have to be effective and engaged. So again, not just enough to just be able to wave the name around, although that can help sometimes. You need someone who's going to be effective in that sponsorship role, and oftentimes they don't know what that means. So the problem persists. I've never heard anyone argue that executive sponsorship isn't helpful, but as we try to do something, whether it's enterprise data governance program, installing that capability for the organization, which is ongoing, or setting up, metadata management, which you could say there's, basically the same thing, different names, or, trying to do an enterprise model, or an enterprise data architecture project, whatever that may be. These principles should apply to any of those, but certainly our focus today will be on enterprise data governance. So as we do that, as we're looking at an enterprise data effort, our focus kind of naturally goes to someone at a senior level, because the departmental views of data, that kind of by subject area of marketing, just some illustrative examples here: sales, product management, etc., human resources. If you, use a real extreme example, if you went to a human resources person to say, hey, we think you should be the sponsor for our enterprise data project, they'd probably look at you a little funny, because they don't really know that the data cross that breadth. And yet, so you look higher in the organization. So, based on the nature of what we're trying to accomplish, we tend to look high in the organization for sponsorship. But part of the challenge is as you get to those higher levels of the organization, these leaders have a lot on their mind. Yes, they may have some, executive level insight to the different subject areas, and like anything, some leaders are better than others in terms of the depth of their understanding and their, the connections they make across those areas. But they're also thinking about, the strategy. Where are we going? They're thinking about the competition and what they're doing, and do they need to react to that, or do they need to, do they just let it go? They're, of course, looking at the share. If you're in a large corporation with shareholders, they're thinking about that, keeping them happy, watching the stock price. Same with the board of directors. They've got, a board there watching over them. Sometimes, can be very critical of what they're doing. They have to be careful about what they commit and be clear on their delivery and execution. They're going out and reading things in the Wall Street Journal, or, when they are, I think a lot of people like the example of sitting on a plane and whatever's in, if there's an interesting article in the in-flight magazine, they can come back to the office and say, hey, we should be doing big data, or, something just, based on something they pick up and read. But, they're trying to stay on top of that. They're thinking about, the next car they're going to get in, or a boat, or whatever. They're usually involved in some sort of other board work or volunteer organizations, and commitments they have there. They're thinking about, if I don't go out and get some exercise, I'm probably going to die of a heart attack here soon. They're, if they have family, they're thinking about that. If they have a secret Canadian family, they have even a lot more to think about, and trying to keep everyone else from finding out about that. So there's a lot on their mind, and they often have to pivot to an area that cries out for attention based on, again, something a competitor is doing, something that shows up in the news about your company or about another company, creating concerns about the industry in general. And so, their attention is a very valuable thing. And all that can contribute to executive attention span disorder. So, and this is not a condemnation of executive leaders. It's much of it is often the nature of what they do, and being able to have that focus is a challenge. Couple that with what we do from an enterprise data perspective is subject to what I call the infrastructure investment paradox. Anything we try to do that benefits a broad range of stakeholders seems to have the biggest challenge getting sponsorship and support. If you put in a new phone system, no one thinks that they should have to pay for it. They think, that should just be paid for and someone else should take care of it. They don't really want to be involved with it. And some people can look at an enterprise data program or a capability the same way. It's such a broad foundational benefit, it's hard for them to tie it in directly to something that they can get behind, or solving a problem that they have on their list of things to do. So in a nutshell, we know from lots of research and everything that projects often fail without executive sponsorship. It's hard to get. We know our enterprise data programs aren't typically things that we can deliver in 90 days, although we can have incremental delivery, but it's not something that's done, especially if you're talking about enterprise data governance. You're talking about implementing a capability, and not an ongoing capability, and not just a 3 month, 9 months, 12-month project. And then that because of that executive attention span disorder, this minimizes the chances of prolonged executive sponsorship. This presentation is not anti-executive sponsorship. It's about dealing with the realities and practicalities of trying to maintain that over the life of your program. So you may often feel like the mouse in the picture on the slide, where it's a trap. Hey, let's get to do this enterprise data program. Let's do, like I said, the enterprise data architecture. Let's do enterprise data governance. And, very well, it could feel like a trap, a no-win situation. So how do we deal with that? Fortunately, again, this is based on experience over a number of years in different parts of the world, different industries, different corporate cultures, and trying to make this happen. So, there's obviously every organization is different, but hopefully this will spark some ideas of flavors of this that would work in your organization. So, as we do this, we should be able to avoid the consequences of program abandonment when the executive attention focuses on something else. We should be able to deliver greater value out of what we do, launch in a more timely fashion, get our first benefits out there more quickly, and minimize our long-running risk of failure or abandonment. So let's start and take a look at these. Now, at this point, you may be saying, "But hey, wait! I have executive sponsorship. I'm just fine." This is, and you may be thinking, "No, maybe I should just tune out of this now." But remember what we said, that if you do, congratulations, that's great. Leverage it while you have it for investment. If you need some investment in some, hardware, software, people, staffing, whatever, move while you have it and get that commitment and make it happen. Good luck, but be careful how you wield the hammer. Too often I see people going in when they get that executive sponsorship and they wield it like a hammer and a threat to people who don't want to play along. Now here's the problem. Most of the people in the organization who you want to have supporting you are very aware of executive attention span disorder too. And you can get an awful lot of passive-aggressive compliance as they just, smile and nod and lead you on, knowing that executive attention will refocus somewhere else if they just wait it out. So you have it, that's great, it can be helpful, but be very careful about how you wield that influence. And then finally, as we've talked about, it can be easily distracted, and not a recrimination of executive leaders, it's the nature of the job. And it can be distracted into something they really do truly need to pay more attention to, and don't expect that to last. I think when I think of redundancy, I think about NASA and all the redundancy they put into their flight programs, and as we know from some of the disasters that have happened, and even then, that's sometimes not enough. But usually that's not enough because someone wanted to cut a corner and on those redundancies and not listen to someone who had some less than pleasant news to deliver. But anyway, that said, think about a grassroots approach. Again, this is not just theory. This is things we've done successfully in the past. And look around at whose jobs will be made easier, who catches the vision of what you're trying to do and will be evangelists for you. Who needs better enterprise data to meet their objectives? It's in a way, it's like thinking about looking at a crowdfunding approach to sponsor your, to build up a new business versus looking for a single angel investor, right? You're going to spread that around. You're going to have a broader base of support. Sometimes when we're talking about an enterprise data program, we dismiss departments because they're not enterprise. Their focus is too narrow. But as long as you're designing with the end in mind and don't design yourself into a corner, and you have that clear enterprise vision of where things need to go, starting with a particular department, especially if they're leaning towards being a supporter of what you're doing and have a strong need, it can be a very good thing. And as you get these other folks on board, you look to leverage the strengths from across your base. And like I said, you'll see in the gray text in each of the boxes, from an incredibly clever sponsor selection, there are corresponding things to think about in each of these other strategies as well, such as unite the co-sponsors under the Alliance of Necessary Evils. So you may look at yourself and say, what, let's just say, for example, you're a brilliant data architect, but you're not necessarily great at, selling the idea to people. As you have that broader base, chances are you're going to be able to find someone who is a supporter who's maybe better at the selling part of it, who can be part of your team and help you with that. So, look to leverage those strengths from across your base to achieve your objective. Next, as you're thinking about that team mindset, start to look around for groups who care about enterprise data. And you may think, well, maybe there's IT and, but there aren't that many others out there. Well, if you look a little deeper, oftentimes you'll find that organizations that are typically not a profit center, but business support functions, are exactly what you're looking for. And there's some examples shown in the graphic on the left there. Internal audit, IT, often considered a necessary evil, legal, regulatory group, the process improvement team, if you have one, ethics and compliance, training. And of course, in different organizations, these groups will have different names and some will be combined. And that's not the point. The point is that they have an interest in data being good, in being easy to understand, and they tend to look at it across subject areas. They need to look at both finance and operational data and HR data and. So these folks will have a lot more in common with you from an enterprise data perspective than you might think. Now, individually, typically, these groups, again, they're not profit centers. They don't necessarily wield a lot of power the same way a sales or manufacturing, part of the organization might, depend on the company and where the power lies. But they also tend to have a seat at the table with the executive team. Again, not viewed as a profit center, but for instance, information security is much often getting a seat at the executive table because of all the, breaches they hear about in the news. Legal is usually there. Regulatory and compliance are often there to keep folks honest, and the ethics team as well. So think about that a little bit creatively, and think about building up an alliance along those lines. Leverage their interests in common data. Get them talking to each other. There's so many examples from our experience where, one of these groups isn't talking to the other. One of my favorite examples is internal audit and information security are both trying to understand, from a kind of a systems audit perspective, going and talking to the same IT subject matter experts, and 85% or more of the questions they're asking them are the same. They never know that the other person, the other group is doing it. The poor IT subject matter experts are getting abused left, right, and down the middle, and they, don't coordinate that. And yet, these groups are often strapped for resources and struggling to keep up with the workload they have. If you can see that and play an orchestrating role and help bring them together, they're going to be grateful to you. They're going to want to help you and then understand more about what you're doing and how that's going to help them, and see those win-win scenarios. Think about voices in a chorus individually, including yourself. If enterprise data is struggling to get a voice in the organization, if you add voices to a chorus, harmonize, you start to hear that, you can be heard, whereas a lone voice may not have been heard before. Again, all these groups, as executive leadership starts to hear from different channels, from that they see as independent, that hey, we really need to do this enterprise data thing. I think that's a core thing that's going to really help us in a lot of areas. That's going to help your cause. Share what you know with them, and be, just really look to build a team that is very collaborative. I talked about and gave the example of reducing redundant effort. The groups, as they collaborate on this, they can share and start to share information. The outputs will be better. They'll not only be able to do more, but they'll be better. Finally, especially as you think about data quality and data governance, these groups have data horror stories to tell. And these data horror stories aren't often publicized because it can be embarrassing to the organization, and sometimes things that they don't aren't a real positive message. But as you look to build your case for what you need to do, those horror stories can be extremely, extremely helpful. So as you get to know them and build that alliance of necessary evils, you will, that will help move you in the right direction. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. Speaking of direction. So again, we're not saying don't seek executive sponsorship, but so as even as you're doing these other things, make sure you are prepared for executive communication, but work like you don't have it. Again, you don't want to just go wielding that hammer, because that won't get the long-term results you need for your long-term program. Along those lines, I'll just very quickly point folks to, and I mentioned this actually, I believe, in the webinar last week too, Gwen Thomas, who does a lot in data governance, did a great piece on a webinar on 7 qualities of winning data governance speech, and I just lay out talk to her, and she said, gave permission to refer to this here, and there's a link when you get the presentation. We can go and look at that, or I'm sure you can find it on the web. But anyway, it's good for any executive communication, but she comes at it and gives you kind of step-by-step how to approach that and think about that, so that when the opportunity presents itself, and whether you're, happen to be riding up the elevator with the CEO and she asks you, what do you do? You have an answer that actually has a good chance of increasing the support for your program. So again, I won't go into the details there, but refer you to that, and you can look at it at your own leisure. So courageous communication. Again, we just touched on the from an executive messaging standpoint, but remember, there's more than one executive. You're not necessarily looking at the chief executive. You're looking at leaders across the board, whether they're at a VP level, and a C level, a director level, a manager level. These are all people you're communicating with. As you do that, you're going to do better. And I realize this is probably, old hat for a number of you listening to this, but I always need these good reminders. So, align and know the business you're trying to support. Too often we get so excited about the fabulous, elegant, solution we have for our enterprise data, solution. We go and we just want to talk to people about that, and we're not stopping and listening and understanding the business problems and business that we're trying to support, and those business problems we're trying to resolve. So, wherever possible, know the individual objectives. What's on their performance, objectives? What do they get bonuses for? And understand, because these are the things that are going to be near and dear to most of these people's hearts. And if you can tie in what you're doing to how, helping them in that regard, you're going to be miles ahead of just talking about how fabulous, your, just pick an example, how your business glossary is going to be in an abstract, conceptual sense. So as you can tie those messages in, that means, of course, you need to customize your message. It means you're not going to have one slide deck or whatever that works for every single stakeholder. You're going to be customizing your message to fit them. So, and make sure you're talking about the benefits to them, not the benefits to you. One thing I think I may have mentioned last week as well is, don't be in a hurry to do the public launch. Build up some of this broader-based support before you try to do a big launch, even if you have executive sponsorship, because people that raises expectations, and ideally you'd like to be able to go show some results and support for this, and have other people speak to support you as well from other areas. Necessary evils from other sponsors, potential sponsors you've identified. Again, just a reminder, repeat, repeat, repeat. Too often I find myself saying, hey, didn't we talk to this person about that last month? Remember that their world doesn't revolve around you, and they're going to need to hear that message multiple times before it sinks in and really becomes part of what they think about when they look to solve problems. And listen, listen, listen. Don't be so anxious to communicate out that you don't set up and include in your communication plan opportunities to listen and hear what is going on in their world. Be watching for what happens across the company, and realize that, reach out to the people and say, hey, I just read about this in our, in the internal newsletter or in the news, whatever it is, and is there, have some suggestions on how you might be able to help them from your enterprise data perspective. So, moving right along, sometimes, we come into this and there's just so much to do, especially in enterprise data governance. Oftentimes there's just so much people don't, where do I start? What data do I start with, or what area or what problem do I try to solve? And, an approach, a strategy that really has served us well in the past is looking to ride that wave of existing priorities. Rather than try to manufacture a separate priority, look to understand what's out there now. Familiarize yourself with people in the process of the PMO. If you have one, the project management office, understand the projects, get to know them, and understand. I can promise you that pretty much all of them, except maybe with few exceptions, are going to have something to do with data in some way that your enterprise data governance or enterprise data architecture or enterprise data program can make that project better. And figure out where that value is and go pitch to the sponsors. Not to do a separate project, but to help enable theirs and have better results than theirs. Thoughtfully, be thoughtful about your messaging again in terms of how much you want to show data governance or your data enterprise data efforts maturing versus being an enabler to key efforts. Be generous. Don't, with who's getting credit for moving things forward. This will build those strong, longer-term relationships and support that you need for your capability. So, as I said, manufacturing priority, that can be a challenge, but also think, about the you're not going to have to try to line up those people who are the subject matter experts to help you. The chances are they've already been allocated to that priority project, and you're riding along, able to tap into them and their expertise to better design or figure out or whatever, get that engagement that you need for your effort. So and then also keep in mind that if you go out there and try to put your enterprise data project up as a separate thing, essentially you're competing against the very stakeholders whose support you hope to win. Think about that. So, just keep that in mind. Sometimes it's the right thing and sometimes there's support for that. But other times with limited resources and limited, time, people want their own stuff done. And you come along and try to bump them, under the line or out of the priority, out of the projects that'll get done that year. It's probably not going to go a long way in winning their support for what you're doing. But if you can look to ride along on theirs instead, that's helpful. And finally, as you take this approach, it makes enterprise data management real. Whatever form of enterprise data program you're doing. It takes it beyond the conceptual to show some application. Oh yeah, this project can have better result because this enterprise data team was engaged. And get your sponsors, get your project teams, get all the people who are involved with that to do some of that messaging for you. They've become now part of that broader team and your potential sponsors. And people will see real benefits instead of conceptual ideas of general corporate goodness. So just to recap, those areas are incredibly clever sponsor selection. Think more crowdfunding than angel investor. Again, it's about mitigating that risk. If you have executive sponsorship, wonderful. Use it in a timely fashion, but use it carefully because you don't want to burn those long-term relationships by being careless wielding the hammer of that executive sponsorship. Build that alliance of necessary evils. Yeah, it may not be the most powerful organizations in the company, but together in a chorus and alliance, you can have a profound impact and address, if you're going to find that those folks in those groups have a lot of common interests with you when it comes to data. The courageous communication, get out there, be relentless, have a plan, think about both your message out and listening to understand what's going on, stay on top of it, don't let it go. And then surfing the data waves. Don't try to manufacture priorities that compete against the very people you want whose sponsorship you want to have. Again, of course, there are exceptions where there's just such broad base and the culture of the company is just, everybody gets it and they want to, they're all supporting you and your project. That's wonderful. Congratulations. If you don't have that, think about this alternative way of looking at things. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mike, and we'll try to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thanks, Grant. That was great. So everyone, if you have a question, please type it into the question box, and we'll go ahead and ask Grant. So I have a couple here that came in. So Grant, first of all, how do we get a data governance team staffed if you actually don't have executive sponsorship?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times, again, what I found in doing grassroots effort is sometimes you're actually, if you looked at your chart, you may be, if any of you on this call may actually be in a different role, and it may not say, data governance lead, but you should go out and you start talking, and instead of looking for direct staff in the beginning, you're still looking to build that broad-based support like we talked about. And it may be you know, in trying to balance, you know, with what you do with your day jobs to get out there and build some of that. And you have to build to the point where you can get enough attention and support to say, you know, it's for people to say, man, if you could do this full time, imagine, you know, how much we'd get done. But also remember that, at least as far as data governance goes, a lot of times this is really reliant on the support and engagement of people who have a day job and need to stay in their day job, but are going to be, you know, collaborating and supporting the enterprise data governance effort. Typically don't need large dedicated teams of people. I know there are, you know, there are plenty of programs who have gone with a larger dedicated team, and, you know, that's okay. But again, I've seen a lot of success where you're really engaging those subject matter experts as data stewards and things, and engaging people in their different roles who are not full-time dedicated. So, you know, you still have to build up some support to get there, and the chances are, you know, when you get that executive sponsorship, that's when you can, you know, make that switch to get to a dedicated role. But sometimes it's just because you feel it's the right thing to do, and you get enough people who feel the same way you do, and you do as much as you can. There will also be, there's also a on next week's webinar talking about heading off the chemical zombie apocalypse is actually a way to get started with data governance and see some early results, you know, without a lot of investment, and again, using people who are already in place doing a job because they see, and then they engage because they see the benefit of what you're doing. So.
Great. I have another question here. What about or why would a project sponsor let the data governance team participate in their project? Again, assuming there's no or limited executive sponsorship.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's all about understanding what, you know, like I said, get in there, understand what the project's trying to accomplish. Chances are you're plugged into a lot of the, you know, from the data side, a lot of the issues, and, you know, there may be, you know, the project team may have an incredibly rosy, you know, just for as an example, an incredible rosy perception of what the data quality is, you know, in terms of the data they have to work with to deliver the project. They may not understand that it's spread across 8 different systems, you know, whatever the case is. A lot of times, you know, especially in projects that come down the pike and end up at the top, you know, very quickly, and end up, you know, are put through kind of the approvals very quickly. A lot of times they're missing some of that background, and so if you can go and approach them as, you know, hey, we're going to help reduce the risk. We're not going to get in the way. We're not going to be on the critical path, but we're going to be working in parallel with you to help you, you know, to help your project be more successful. You know, and you can talk to them in specifics because you've done your homework. Again, we've seen that be very, very successful. It's going to be, you know, why exactly they're going to allow you to do it is going to be based primarily on your ability to understand what they're wrestling with, the things they don't know yet from a data perspective, and being able to sell them on the value of your participation.
Got it. So one more here. How do we have a data governance council at an executive level if we don't have executive sponsorship?
Yeah, no, so this is where a little bit of my contrarian beliefs may crop up. I've been very successful in the past not creating the specific, and I know that some people just, you know, their heads might explode when they hear this, but not having a council dedicated to data governance, but rather looking at the executive team, or what, you know, whatever level of management is appropriate, and seeing, you know, where is there an existing meeting where all the right people are already getting together, and if so, just becoming an agenda item as needed on that meeting already. I've had very positive reaction to that, where still all the data governance issues are addressed and escalated as they need to be. But by promising those people not to form another committee who are already are so overscheduled, and sitting down with them and saying, if you agree to hear these things, put these items on your agenda when they come up, I promise not to have another, standing meeting every quarter or every month or whatever it is, for the, that you're going to have to put on your calendar and work, manage around. We'll only call, we'll only have an agenda item in this other, this existing meeting if needed. They're usually very grateful and then very cooperative in terms of being able to address the issues. So, if you're stuck on the idea of to have data governance, I need to, it's like I said, I'm a little bit contrarian here. The idea is to have a mechanism, a process to have issues escalated and resolved. It does not have to be in a dedicated council or a dedicated committee or meeting. The point is to have the process defined to escalate, to make those decisions that need to be made at that level. And so by doing that with existing meetings, it also helps avoid the perception that your data governance program is just a big bureaucratic overlay that's going to be, a big headache in terms of time and meetings and things like that.
Great. So I got one more for you, Grant. And this is one that you and I have discussed in the past. So I've talked to customers where they have an executive committee, they have sponsorship, the mid-level line of business managers are in sync, but they need a way to engage the business. So the on the ground, the people, the analysts, the data stewards. How do you engage them when you have everything in place from an executive level, but you need a way to roll this out to the field or to your, to the people that matter on the ground? How do you get them engaged?
Typically, what
and not be afraid of it. Not be
yeah,
afraid of.
No. Yeah, I mean, people. Again, it's kind of, you have to get out there and talk to them. You have to, if you have executive sponsorship at the time you're trying to do that, that can help open the door. But what you do with it then is, in whether you succeed or fail, is after the door is opened, is really up to you. And so, as much as we talked about, that's part of building that broad-based support. Isn't just at the the senior level. It's the people who are going to be doing this down the road. If they're not, and so I'm sorry, Mike, I am getting to answer that, but to set some context, we have to remember that the people who are going to keep this running are the people who are out there doing the work, doing the running, executing the processes that make the business run. And when they see benefit in doing it from running their processes in a way that supports and benefits from good data governance, they'll keep doing it because they know it's in their own best interest. And that's the key of how we go and approach those people at that level, is saying almost without fail over a dozen years, you can always find those people who are those true subject matter experts, and every project that comes down the pike, they are getting hammered to explain the data, the process, that part of the business to the project teams. And then the project's finished, all the project documentation goes off in a shared folder somewhere that no one ever sees again, and all that knowledge they shared is gone. But when you approach them and help them realize that what they're doing is investing their time, they're doing the same thing they've been doing, but this way, through data governance, it's going to become a lasting, accessible benefit to everyone, that it's not going to disappear when a project disappears, that what they take time to explain and define and talk about data quality requirements and all those things, that they can do it once and kind of keep on top of it and not have to redo it every time, they get on board pretty quickly because they see that as a good investment of their time. And so, you know, it's really about getting out and selling it to them, understanding what their world looks like and how you can make it better. But generally, you know, the theme that seems to work well for engaging people at that level is, here's why it's a win for you. You know, here's why it's worth investing your time, because your job is going to become easier. You can go home at 5 o'clock. You know, once you know, you have to put in some time to up front. Typically, you know, so that engagement's can be a little front loaded, but they know they're going to be doing that anyway, and when they see that it's going to be delivered in a way that keeps them from having to do that again the next time for the next project that rolls around, they typically get on board pretty quickly.
Great. Well, good. Well, I think that's the end of our, those are the questions that came in.
Okay.
Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
I think we have a couple of other wrap-up slides here. Yeah. So, yeah, I wanted to mention this to everyone. We have Datasource will be at, you know, several different events around the country. There's 2 in Denver. The Informatica User Group will be presenting at. We also have some customer presentations that's in Denver on September 15th. We're also hosting a TDWI Colorado chapter event as well, and that's actually also on September 15th. It says the January 28th, but it's actually the same day, September 15th. And then Grant, I think you're speaking at the Data Governance Winter Conference in Florida in November. Okay, great. So these are just some other areas that you can join us. You can meet Grant in Delray Beach, Florida, and heckle him from there. Also wanted to remind everyone, next week we're doing the final component of our educational webinar. So the title is Heading Off the Analytics Zombie Apocalypse. And so that'll be, again, next Tuesday, August 30th, and it'll be at the same time, 11 Mountain, 12 Central, 1 o'clock Eastern. So that's it. Please, actually, one more thing, the recording is actually going to go out to everyone that registered, so you'll get a link to the recording so you can rewatch. So anyway, thanks everyone for your time today. Grant, thanks a lot for your time and putting this together for us, and we look forward to speaking with you next week. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.